Hi guys. Tonight, we are going to take a long, slow journey back through the corridors of time, moving away from the loud echoes of great battles and the heavy names of kings and conquerors that usually fill our history books. Instead, we are going to find ourselves in a much quieter place, a place where the only sounds are the rhythmic pulse of the tide and the steady, rhythmic groan of ancient timber. We are going to explore the forgotten, quiet, daily lives of the sailors who lived and worked upon the ancient seas. These were men whose names have mostly been lost to the dust, yet they spent their lives in an intimate dance with the elements, navigating a world that was vast, unpredictable, and deeply beautiful in its simplicity. Our focus tonight isn't on the heroics of discovery or the drama of a storm, but on the small, ordinary moments that made up the fabric of their existence. The way the light hit the deck at dawn, the smell of the damp wool they slept in, and the shared silence of a crew waking up in the middle of a vast, blue emptiness. So, I invite you to settle in, find a comfortable position, and let the modern world fade away as we step aboard a wooden vessel from 2,000 years ago, drifting slowly across the Mediterranean under a canopy of fading stars. The transition from the deep, velvet black of night to the first, tentative gray of morning is a slow and sacred process when you are far from the sight of land. Out here, on the open water, there are no walls to catch the light and no hills to hide the sun. There is only the horizon, a perfect, unbroken circle where the sky meets the sea in a seamless embrace. As the stars begin to dim, one by one, the world feels incredibly large, and the ship feels incredibly small, a tiny wooden shell cradling its human cargo. The air is cool, carrying the heavy, sharp scent of salt and the dampness of the morning mist that clings to everything: the ropes, the wood, the very skin of the men resting on the deck. This is the time when the world is most still, yet the ship itself is never truly silent. Even in the calmest of waters, an ancient wooden ship is a living, breathing thing, possessed of a voice that speaks in 1,000 different tones. There is the low, guttering hum of the wind passing through the rigging, a sound like a distant choir holding a single, steady note. There is the rhythmic slap of the water against the hull, a gentle percussion that marks the passing of the seconds in this timeless place. And beneath it all, there is the deep, structural groan of the planks and beams as they adjust to the weight of the sea, a reminder of the immense pressure and the strength of the craftsmanship that holds the world of the sailors together. As the light begins to change, shifting from a bruised purple to a soft, smoky pearl, the details of the ship start to emerge from the shadows. You begin to see the texture of the great mast, a massive trunk of pine or cedar, smoothed by years of handling and weathered by the sun and spray. It stands tall and resolute, the spine of the vessel rooted deep in the hold and reaching up toward the heavens. The ropes, thick coils of hemp and flax, are everywhere, crisscrossing the space in a complex web of tension and release. In the dim light, they look like the sinews of a great beast, taut and vibrating with the energy of the wind. The sails, heavy sheets of woven linen, hang in soft, voluminous folds, occasionally snapping with a sharp, crisp sound as they catch a stray breeze, or billowing out like the chest of a giant taking a deep, slow breath. Everything is coated in a fine layer of dew, a silver sheen that makes the wood look dark and rich, and makes the ropes feel heavy and cold to the touch. It is a world of texture, the roughness of the grain, the coarseness of the fibers, the slickness of the salt crust, and in this pre-dawn hour, these physical sensations are all that truly exist. Beneath the great expanse of the sail, scattered across the deck and tucked into whatever small spaces they could find, the sailors begin to stir. In the ancient world, there were no private cabins or comfortable bunks for the common seamen. Their lives were lived in the open, shared with their companions and the elements alike. They slept where they worked, wrapping themselves in thick cloaks of heavy, undyed wool that smelled of wood smoke, old sweat, and the sea. These cloaks were their only protection against the damp night air, and as the men wake, they do so with a slow, stiff grace, their joints aching from the hardness of the deck and the constant, subtle motion of the ship. There is no sudden alarm, no shouting to begin the day. Instead, the awakening is a quiet, individual ritual. A man might sit up and rub his eyes, looking out over the rail at the brightening horizon, his breath a faint puff of white in the cool air. Another might stretch his arms wide, feeling the pull of his muscles after a night of fitful sleep, while his neighbor remains still for a few moments longer, listening to the familiar music of the ship's timbers. There is a profound sense of intimacy in these moments, a connection born of shared space and a shared destiny. These men knew the sound of each other's breathing, the patterns of their snoring, and the way they moved in their sleep. They were a community bound together by the wooden walls of their vessel, and the silence of the morning is not an empty silence, but one filled with the quiet recognition of their collective existence. As they rise, they do not speak much. The morning is a time for internal reflection, for centering oneself before the labor of the day begins. They move with a practiced ease, their feet finding purchase on the sloping, damp deck without the need for thought. To an ancient sailor, the ship was not just a vehicle. It was an extension of his own body. He felt the vibration of the waves through the soles of his feet. He understood the meaning of every creak in the mast, and he could sense the changing of the wind before it even touched his face. This deep, intuitive connection to the vessel and the environment is something we have largely lost in our modern, insulated world, but here, in the dawn of 2,000 years ago, it is the very essence of life. The rocking of the ship is a constant, foundational experience, a slow and swaying rhythm that never truly ceases. It is the heartbeat of the sea, translated through the medium of oak and pine, to those who spend their lives on the water. This motion becomes so natural that the stillness of the land can feel alien and unsettling. The ship rolls gently from side to side, a long lingering tilt that forces the body to constantly adjust, to find a new center of gravity with every passing moment. It is a soothing motion, like the swaying of a cradle, and it imbues everything on board with a sense of fluidity. The water in the storage jars sloshes softly against the ceramic sides. The spare coils of rope shift almost imperceptibly on the deck. Even the heavy stones used for ballast deep in the hold seem to settle and groan in sympathy with the movement. This constant motion is a reminder that the ship is not a static object, but a participant in the life of the ocean, a guest in a realm that is always in flux. As the sun finally breaks the horizon, a sliver of brilliant gold cutting through the gray, the world is suddenly transformed. The light spills across the water in a long, shimmering path, turning the dark waves into a field of liquid fire. On the ship, the shadows retreat, revealing the intricate details of the craft's construction, the bronze nails driven deep into the planks, the dark lines of pitch used to seal the seams, and the weathered carvings on the prow that gaze out over the water with timeless, painted eyes. The sailors begin to move with more purpose now, though the atmosphere remains calm and unhurried. There is a sense of deep time here, a feeling that this morning is no different from 1,000 mornings that came before it and 1,000 that will follow. The tasks that await them are ancient and repetitive, checking the tension of the ropes, clearing the deck of the night's debris, preparing the simple food that will sustain them through the heat of the day. The smell of the morning changes as the sun warms the wood and the canvas. The sharp, cold scent of the salt begins to mingle with the earthy, resinous aroma of the pine and the faint, sweet smell of the drying linen. If there is a small brazier on board, the first wisps of charcoal smoke might rise into the air, a homely and comforting scent that speaks of warmth and the possibility of a hot meal. The ancient diet at sea was simple and rugged hard bread or barley cakes, perhaps some dried fish or a handful of olives, washed down with water that had grown flat in the jars, or wine heavily diluted to keep the mind sharp. But in the first light of the day, even these humble provisions are a blessing, a way to anchor the body to the physical world, We often think of ancient life as being defined by its hardships, and certainly, the life of a sailor was one of physical toil and constant exposure to the elements. But there was also a profound sense of peace to be found in the routine, a clarity that comes from being stripped of the distractions of the shore. Out here, there are no politics, no taxes, no crowds, and no noise. There is only the ship, the sea, and the sky. The sailors lived in a world of primary colors and fundamental forces. They watched the migration of birds, the play of dolphins in the bow wave, and the changing colors of the water, which could shift from a pale, translucent green to a deep, royal indigo in the space of a few miles. They possessed a knowledge of the natural world that was both practical and spiritual, seeing the hand of the gods in the direction of the wind and the clarity of the stars. The transition from the stillness of sleep to the first movements of the day is a slow, rhythmic unfolding, much like the unfurling of the heavy linen sails themselves. As the sun's golden arc climbs higher above the horizon, the sailors begin to stir in the small sheltered pockets of the ship where they had sought refuge from the night's damp air. One by one, they rise from the hard wooden planks that have served as their beds, their bodies moving with a stiff, practiced grace that comes from years of sleeping on a surface that never truly stops moving. There is a deep, quiet intimacy in this collective awakening. A sailor might first reach out a hand, feeling the grain of the deck beneath his palm, confirming the reality of the vessel before his eyes even open. The wood is cool and slightly slick with the morning's dew, a fine mist that has settled over everything like a silver veil. He pushes himself up slowly, feeling the familiar protest of muscles that have been tensed all night against the gentle roll of the sea. There is no haste in these movements, no jarring transition from the world of dreams to the world of labor. Instead, there is a lingering bridge of silence, a period where the man and the ship reacquaint themselves with one another in the soft, searching light of the early morning. With the rising comes the ritual of the bedding, though bedding is perhaps too generous a word for the single, heavy cloak of undyed wool that each man carries. These garments, often thick and smelling of the natural lanolin of the sheep and the sharp, briny temps of the sea, are the sailors' most prized possessions. As they stand, they begin the methodical process of folding these cloaks. It is a task performed with a quiet, meditative focus. The fabric is heavy and stiff with salt, having absorbed the spray of the waves and the humidity of the night air. A sailor takes the corners of the cloth, smoothing out the wrinkles with his calloused hands, feeling the rough texture of the fibers. He folds it once, then twice, pressing the air out of the wool until it is a compact, manageable square. This small act of order in the vast, disordered expanse of the ocean is a way of reclaiming his personal space. He might tuck the bundle away into a small crevice between the hull and a storage jar, or perhaps use it as a makeshift seat for the first tasks of the morning. There is a profound sense of dignity in this simplicity, a recognition that on a ship, every object must have its place, and every movement must serve a purpose. As the men stretch their tired limbs, the air is filled with a specific symphony of scents that define the world of the ancient mariner. It is a rich, layered aroma that never truly leaves the skin or the lungs. First, there is the foundational scent of the sea, a sharp, cold, and mineral smell that speaks of infinite depths and the constant churn of the tides. Mingled with this is the deep, resinous perfume of the ship itself. Ancient vessels were held together and made watertight by generous applications of pitch and pine resin, a dark, viscous substance that weeps from the seams of the wood when warmed by the sun. This smell is earthy and sweet, like a forest that has been submerged in salt. It clings to the ropes, the masts, and the very skin of the men. Then there is the smell of the ropes themselves, heavy coils of hemp and flax that have a dusty vegetal scent when dry, but transform into something pungent and musky when wet. These smells are not unpleasant to the sailor. They are the markers of safety and stability. They are the olfactory landscape of his home, a reassurance that the wooden walls are holding and the ship is alive and well beneath his feet. The first tasks of the day are performed in a silence that is both respectful and functional. There is no need for verbal commands in these early hours. The crew moves according to a choreography that has been etched into their bones by repetition. A man might move toward the great earthenware jars that are lashed to the center of the deck, his bare feet making a soft, rhythmic padding sound against the wood. These jars, or amphorae, contain the ship's most precious cargo fresh water. He tips a jar carefully, pouring a small amount of the flat, cool liquid into a ceramic cup or his cupped palms. He splashes his face, the shock of the water chasing away the last remnants of sleep, the droplets clinging to his beard and glinting like jewels in the sun. He drinks slowly, savoring the taste of the land that still lingers in the water, a quiet reminder of the world they have left behind. Another sailor might begin the task of checking the tension in the rigging. He walks to the base of the mast, his hands reaching out to touch the thick, hairy fibers of the ropes. He pulls on them gently, feeling the vibration, listening to the note they strike as they resist the pull of the wind. To a trained ear, a rope speaks a language of its own, and the sailor listens for any sign of fraying or slackness that might have developed during the night. On the deck, the work of cleaning begins. This is not the frantic scrubbing of a modern vessel, but a slow and thorough ritual of maintenance. A sailor might use a bucket made of stiffened leather, lowering it over the side of the ship with a long cord. He feels the weight of the sea as the bucket fills, the water resisting his pull as he hauls it back up. He pours the clear, sparkling seawater across the deck, watching as it rushes over the planks, carrying away the salt crust and the dust of the previous day. He uses a broom made of bundled twigs or stiff grasses to push the water toward the scuppers, the drainage holes along the sides of the hull. The sound is soothing, the shush of the water, the rhythmic scrape of the broom, and the occasional splash as the bucket is lowered once more. This act of washing the ship is a way of honoring the vessel, a gesture of gratitude for the protection it provides. As the water evaporates in the growing heat of the sun, it leaves the wood looking dark and rich, the grain of the oak and pine standing out in sharp relief. Nearby, another man might be seated on a low wooden bench, his attention focused on a pile of torn fishing nets or a frayed section of rope. His fingers move with incredible dexterity, weaving the coarse fibers back together with a bone or wooden needle. This is the quiet, patient work of the sea, a task that requires no strength but a great deal of endurance. He focuses on the rhythm of the stitch, the way the new cord marries with the old, creating a bond that is stronger than it was before. He does not look up as his companions move around him. He is lost in the geometry of the net, in the simple satisfaction of repairing what has been broken. Around him, the ship continues its slow, swaying dance, the mast drawing invisible circles against the pale blue of the sky. The creaking of the ship's joints provides a constant, comforting background noise, a reminder that the vessel is a complex, interconnected system where every piece of wood and every length of rope plays a vital role. As the morning progresses, the light loses its pearly softness and becomes more direct, casting long, sharp shadows across the deck. The sailors move into these shadows when they can, their skin already beginning to feel the first touch of the sun's warmth. They find small moments of stillness between their tasks. A man might lean against the rail, looking out at the wake of the ship, the white, frothing path that trails behind them like a fading memory. He watches the way the water swirls and bubbles, the way the light reflects off the crests of the waves in a dazzling mosaic of silver and blue. There is a sense of immense peace in this observation, a recognition of the ship's place in the wider world. The vessel is a tiny island of human purpose in a vast sea of natural force, and the sailor is the bridge between the two. He feels the power of the wind in the sail above him, a steady, invisible hand pushing them forward, and he feels the resistance of the water against the hull, a constant, liquid embrace. The physical sensations of the morning are deeply grounding. the feel of the sun on the back of the neck, the roughness of the rope against the palm, the vibration of the deck through the soles of the feet. All of these things connect the sailor to the present moment. There is no room for anxiety about the future or regret for the past on an ancient ship. There is only the immediate reality of the wind, the sea, and the wood. This presence of mind is what allowed these men to navigate the world without maps or instruments, relying instead on their intuition and their intimate knowledge of the environment. They watched the flight of the birds, noticing the way a gull or a petrel would bank into the wind. They observed the color of the water, knowing that a shift from deep indigo to a lighter green signaled a change in depth or the proximity of a hidden reef. They smelled the air, detecting the scent of rain or the earthy aroma of distant land long before it appeared on the horizon. In the center of the ship, near the hearth if the weather is calm enough to permit a small fire, another sailor might be preparing the first meal of the day. This is a simple affair, consisting of items that can withstand the heat and the dampness of a long voyage. He might take a handful of hard twice-baked bread, known as ship's biscuit or bouchalatum, and soak it in a small bowl of wine and water to soften it. The sound of the bread breaking, the dry snap of the grain, is a familiar morning noise. He might add a few salted olives, their skins dark and wrinkled, or a piece of dried fish that has been hanging from the rigging to cure in the sun and salt. The sun has now climbed into the high center of the sky, shedding its gentle morning gold for a brilliant, penetrating white that turns the surface of the sea into a mirror of polished silver. The shadows on the deck have shrunk to small, dark pools at the feet of the masts and the edges of the storage jars. In this hour of peak light, the rhythm of the ship shifts once more, moving from the active labor of the morning into a more contemplative, quiet state. This is the time when the body's needs begin to speak above the sound of the wind and the wood. The heat of the Mediterranean day is a physical weight, drawing the moisture from the skin and making the air feel thick with the scent of salt and drying timber. It is the time for the midday meal, a ritual not of luxury, but of profound necessity and quiet communal connection. In the center of the vessel, where the movement is most stable, the sailors gather for their sustenance. There are no tables here, no chairs, and no finery. They sit upon the deck itself, their backs resting against the sun-warmed hull or tucked into the shade of the great linen sail. The meal begins with the opening of the storage areas, a process that is treated with a certain reverence. Food at sea is a precious cargo, a lifeline that connects the men to the earth they have left behind. A sailor reaches for a heavy, woven basket, its fibers stiff and gray from the salt spray. Inside lies the staple of their existence, the hard, twice-baked bread. This bread is not like the soft loaves found in a village oven. It is dense, rugged, and unyielding, baked until every drop of moisture has vanished to ensure it survives the humidity of the voyage. As a sailor takes a piece of this bread, you can see the strength in his hands. He does not simply bite into it. The bread is too hard for that. Instead, there is a slow, methodical process of preparation. He might use a small iron knife to chip away a piece, the sound of the blade against the grain, a sharp, dry clack that punctuates the silence. Or, more often, he takes a small ceramic bowl and fills it with a mixture of water and a splash of sharp vinegary wine. He places the bread into the liquid, watching as the parched grain begins to swell and soften. This waiting is part of the meal, a forced moment of patience that encourages the mind to settle. He watches the way the water turns a cloudy, pale amber, and he smells the earthy, fermented scent of the grain as it reawakens. There is a deep, simple satisfaction in this, a reminder that even the hardest things can be made soft with time and care. Beside the bread, there are the small accompaniments that provide the salt and the oil the body craves. A small wooden bowl is passed around, filled with dark, wrinkled olives. These olives have been cured in brine for months, and they carry the concentrated essence of the groves, bitter, salty, and rich with the oil of the earth. A sailor takes one, rolling it between his fingers, feeling the waxy skin before placing it in his mouth. The taste is a sudden, sharp burst of life against the neutrality of the bread. Then there is the dried fish, perhaps small sprats or pieces of larger tuna that have been salted and hung in the rigging to dry until they are as stiff as the wood of the ship. The texture is fibrous and tough, requiring long, slow chewing that brings out the deep, savory flavor of the ocean. This is not a meal to be rushed. It is a meal to be experienced in small, deliberate increments, each bite a victory over the vast, empty hunger of the sea. The act of eating together in this way creates a silent language of companionship. There is very little talking. The heat of the day and the effort of the work have exhausted the need for unnecessary words. Instead, there is the sound of the sea, the rhythmic thrum of the rigging, and the steady, communal sound of chewing and swallowing. They share the space with an easy familiarity, their knees brushing, their shoulders leaning into one another as the ship rolls. If one man finishes his portion of olives, another might wordlessly push the bowl toward him. This is the quiet masonry of a crew, the small, unrecorded gestures of kindness that hold a group of men together in the face of the infinite. They are not just sailors. They are a family of the waves, bound by the shared texture of the bread and the shared weight of the sun. Perhaps the most sacred element of the meal and of the day itself is the water. On an ancient ship, water is more than just a drink. It is a measured, finite resource that dictates the limits of their world. The water is kept in large, earthenware amphorae, their bellies rounded and their necks narrow to prevent spilling. These jars are stored deep in the hold or lashed securely to the deck, and they are treated with more care than any chest of gold. When the time comes for the water ration, the atmosphere becomes even more hushed. A senior sailor or the ship's master might be the one to tip the jar, his movements slow and precise, to ensure not a single drop is wasted. The water is poured into a shared cup, perhaps made of dull bronze or a simple unglazed clay that feels cool and slightly damp to the touch. The water is not the clear, sparkling liquid we know today. It has been sitting in the jar for days or weeks, and it has taken on a flat, earthy taste, perhaps with a hint of the pitch used to seal the vessel. But to a parched throat in the midday heat, it is more precious than the finest wine. As the cup is passed from hand to hand, each man takes his turn. He holds the cup with both hands, feeling the weight of the liquid, watching the way it ripples with the motion of the ship. He drinks slowly, letting the water coat his tongue in the back of his throat, feeling the coolness spread through his chest. It is a moment of pure, sensory relief, a physical quenching of the fire that the sun has lit within him. The shared cup is a symbol of their mutual dependence. They drink from the same source, and they guard that source with their lives. As the meal concludes, a sense of deep, heavy lethargy often settles over the deck. This is the time for the meridiatio, the midday rest. The sailors do not move far. They simply lean back where they are, closing their eyes against the glare of the sky. The ship continues its journey, guided by the steady hand of the helmsman at the stern, who remains awake and vigilant, his eyes fixed on the horizon, even as his body sways with the rhythm of the waves. For the others, this is a time of drifting between wakefulness and sleep. The sound of the water against the hull becomes a lullaby, a constant, shushing noise that drowns out all other thoughts. They listen to the creak of the mast, a sound that is as familiar as their own heartbeat, and they feel the vibration of the sea through the planks of the deck. In this state of rest, the mind wanders back to the land, but only in fragmented, sensory ways. They might remember the smell of damp earth after a rain, the sound of a goat's bell in the hills, or the feeling of standing on soil that does not move. But these memories are distant and ethereal, like the clouds that drift across the sun. Their reality is the ship, the wood, the salt, and the men beside them. There is a profound simplicity to this existence, a life stripped of the complexities of the shore. Here, Success is measured by the fullness of a water jar, the integrity of a sail, and the shared peace of a midday meal. It is a life of primary sensations, where the taste of a single olive or the coolness of a swallow of water can be a source of immense gratitude. The heat begins to draw the resin out of the pine planks once more, and the scent of the ship intensifies. It is a warm, sticky smell, like incense burning in a vast open-air temple. The sailors breathe it in, their lungs accustomed to the mixture of pine, pitch, and salt. Even the ropes seem to relax in the heat, their fibers expanding and softening, losing the tension of the morning's work. The sail above them is a great, white ceiling, occasionally snapping with a sound like a distant drum as the wind shifts, but mostly holding its shape, a steady, billowing presence that pulls them toward their destination. Let yourself sink into this scene. Imagine you are sitting on the deck, the rough wood pressing against your legs. Feel the warmth of the sun on your arms, a heavy but comforting embrace. You have finished your small portion of bread and olives, and the taste of the salt still lingers on your lips. You watch the shared cup as it moves among your companions, a vessel of life in a world of blue. There is no urgency to get up, no task that cannot wait until the sun has begun its descent. The world is reduced to the square of the deck and the circle of the horizon. You are part of this small, floating world, safe and sustained. As you sit in the silence, you notice the details you might have missed in the activity of the morning. You see the way the salt has dried in white, crystalline patterns on the edge of the rail, forming intricate, snowy maps of the spray. You see the small, rhythmic movements of the steering oars at the back of the ship, the wood dipping in and out of the water with a sound like a gentle sigh. You see the play of the light on the surface of the sea, how it shifts from silver to a deep, bruised violet where the water is deepest. The sea is not just one thing. It is a living, changing entity, and from the deck of the ship, you are witness to its every mood. The companionship of the sailors is a quiet, steadying force. You look at the man sitting next to you. His skin is darkened by years of sun. His hands are a map of scars and calluses, and his eyes are narrowed from a lifetime of looking into the wind. He does not need to speak for you to know that he is content, that he finds the same peace in this midday stillness that you do. As the sun begins its long, slow descent toward the western rim of the world, the heavy stillness of the midday rest dissolves into the steady, rhythmic pulse of afternoon labor. On an ancient ship, work is not a series of disconnected tasks with a defined beginning and end. It is a continuous, circular flow, a repetitive dance that sustains the life of the vessel and the safety of the men within it. There is a deep, quiet beauty in this repetition. It is the labor of the hands and the heart, performed with a meditative focus that requires no rush and no shouting. The sailors rise from their shaded corners, their bodies already moving in anticipation of the tasks ahead, their joints finding their familiar alignment with the swaying deck. The world of the ship is one of constant maintenance, a battle against the subtle, persistent erosion of the salt and the wind, and the men meet this challenge with a calm, unhurried persistence that has been passed down through generations of mariners. The most fundamental rhythm of the ship is found in the ropes, the miles of hempen flax that bind the masts to the hull and the sails to the wind. These ropes are the sinews of the vessel, and they require constant attention. A sailor moves toward a heavy coil near the base of the mast, his hands reaching out to feel the tension. To an ancient mariner, a rope is not a static object. It is a living thing that breathes with the wind. He feels the texture of the fibers, coarse and prickly against his calloused palms, smelling of dried earth and sun-baked vegetation. When the wind shifts, even slightly, the rigging must be adjusted to keep the ship on its true course. This is a task often performed in unison, a collective effort of heave and hold. 2 or 3 men stand together, their feet braced against the wooden cleats on the deck. They grip the rope, their fingers sinking into the braided strands, and they pull. It is a slow, steady exertion of power. There is no sudden jerk, only a rhythmic leaning of the body, a shared weight that uses the gravity of the men to move the weight of the sea. The sound of this work is a low, musical creak, the thrum of the rope stretching over a wooden block, the soft groan of the timber as it accepts the new tension. It is a comforting sound, a confirmation of the ship's responsiveness. As they pull, the sailors' breathing falls into a shared cadence, a soft, hushing sound that matches the slap of the waves against the hull. When the desired tension is reached, the knot is tied with a fluid, practiced motion that seems almost like a magic trick. The rope is looped and tucked, drawn tight with a final decisive tug that locks the wind into the sail. This repetition and tie, adjust, heave, lock is performed hundreds of times in a single journey, yet it never feels like a burden. It is the steady heartbeat of the voyage, a way of staying in constant conversation with the elements. Near the prow, in the shadow of the bulwark, another sailor is engaged in the patient work of repair. The sails, those vast expanses of woven linen, are the ship's wings, but they are fragile wings, prone to fraying and small tears from the constant pressure of the breeze and the occasional lash of spray. He sits on the deck with a section of the heavy fabric draped over his knees, his focus narrowed to the small area beneath his hands. His tool is a simple needle, carved from the bone of a large fish or shaped from a piece of hard, polished wood. It is smooth and warm in his fingers, an extension of his own will. Beside him lies a spool of thick linen thread, coated in a layer of beeswax to help it slide through the fabric and protect it. From the rot of the salt, the rhythm of the needle is slow and hypnotic. Push, pull, cinch. Push, pull, cinch. He watches as the needle pierces the weave of the linen, a tiny, rhythmic pop that is barely audible above the sound of the sea. He draws the thread through, his arm moving in a wide, graceful arc, then pulls it tight, the stitch disappearing into the heavy texture of the sail. He is not just repairing a tier, he is weaving himself into the fabric of the ship's survival. There is no haste in his work. If the repair takes an hour, or 3, or the entire afternoon, it does not matter. The sea is vast, and the destination is far, and the only thing that truly exists is the next stitch. He feels the weight of the fabric, heavy and slightly damp, and he sees the way the light filters through the weave, turning the linen into a translucent screen of pale cream and gold. It is a quiet, solitary meditation, a space of peace within the activity of the ship. While some attend to the rigging and the sails, others are occupied with the constant task of cleaning. The deck of an ancient ship is a theater of salt, as the waves break against the hull and the spray drifts over the rail. The water evaporates in the heat, leaving behind a fine, white crust of salt that can make the wood dangerously slick and eventually eat away at the timber. The cleaning is a repetitive, circular motion that mirrors the movement of the waves themselves. A sailor takes a broom made of bundled twigs or stiff, dried grasses, and he begins to sweep. The sound is a rhythmic shush-shush that echoes the sighing of the wind. He moves across the deck with a slow, swaying gait, his body automatically compensating for the roll of the ship as he pushes the salt and the dust toward the scuppers every so often. He stops to pour a bucket of fresh seawater over a particularly stubborn patch of brine. The water splashes across the dark planks, foaming white for a moment before it settles and flows, carrying the salt away. The wood glistens in the afternoon light, the deep reds and browns of the grain coming alive beneath the moisture. The sailor watches the water retreat, a small, receding tide on a wooden shore. This task is never truly finished. By the time he has reached the stern, the prow is already beginning to whiten again with a new layer of salt. But there is no frustration in this futility. The repetition is the point. It is a ritual of care, a way of staying present and attentive to the vessel that carries them. The cleaning of the deck is the housekeeping of the soul, a clearing away of the debris of the journey to make room for the moments of stillness that follow in the hold. Beneath the deck, The work is even more slow and sensory. Here, in the dim, cool light that smells strongly of pitch, earth, and old wood, a sailor might be checking the cargo or the ballast. The ballast often heavy stones or bags of sandies. What gives the ship its stability? Its heeled weight that keeps it from tossing too wildly in the waves. The task is to ensure that nothing is shifted, that the weight remains centered and secure. He moves through the cramped space with a practiced ease, his hands skimming over the rough surfaces of the stones and the cool, damp sides of the ceramic jars. He listens to the ship from the inside out. Down here, the sounds of the sea are muffled and deep, a low, percussive drumming that vibrates through the hull. He feels the structural integrity of the ship in his very bones, the way the ribs of the vessel hold the planks in a tight, unyielding embrace. He might take a small mallet and tap against the wood, listening for the solid, healthy thud that tells him the timber is sound. It is a quiet, dark world, a place of shadows and echoes, and the work here is a form of listening, a way of ensuring that the heart of the ship remains strong as the afternoon moves forward. The repetition of these tasks creates a profound sense of unity among the crew. They are like the parts of a great wooden clock, each moving in its own orbit, but all contributing to the same steady passage of time. There is no competition, no desire to outdo one another. Each man's work is essential, and each man's rhythm is his own. You can see it in the way they move past each other on the narrow deck, a subtle shift of the shoulder, a shared glance that acknowledges the common effort. The work is the glue that binds them, a shared language of movement that transcends the need for speech. The tools they use are simple, but they are imbued with the history of the voyage. A wooden mallet, its head rounded and smoothed by thousands of strikes. A bronze scraper, its edge worn thin by the removal of barnacles and old pitch. A leather bucket, its handle darkened by the sweat of many hands. These objects are not just equipment, they are companions. A sailor knows the weight and the balance of his tools, as well as he knows the lines of his own face. He treats them with a quiet respect, cleaning them at the end of the day and tucking them away in their proper places. There is a profound dignity in this relationship with the material world, a recognition that the quality of the work is reflected in the care given to the tools. The repetition of the labor has a transformative effect on the mind. When you pull the same rope, stitch the same seam, or sweep the same deck day after day, the ego begins to quiet. The worries of the shore, their debts, the family troubles, the political unrest begin to feel distant, and they are replaced by the immediate, physical reality of the task at hand. The mind enters a state of flow, where the boundary between the worker and the work begins to blur. The sailor is not just pulling a rope, he is the tension in the line. He is not just stitching a sail, he is the strength of the linen. This immersion in the present moment is the true secret of the ancient mariners' endurance. It is how they survived weeks and months on the open sea, without the distractions of the modern world. They found their peace in the work itself, in the rhythmic, unending cycle of maintenance and care. As the final sliver of the sun disappears beneath the horizon, leaving behind a sky of bruised violet and fading embers, the visual world of the ship begins to recede, and the world of sound takes its place. On an ancient wooden vessel at sea, the darkness is never truly silent. Instead, it is a rich, layered tapestry of noise that speaks of the ship's health, the sea's mood, and the passage of time. To the sailors who lived and worked here, these sounds were more than just background noise. They were a constant, reassuring dialogue, a symphony of survival that lulled the weary into sleep and kept the watchful centered in their duty. As the light fails, the ears sharpen, and the ship reveals its true voice, a voice made of water, wind, and old, honest timber. The most foundational sound, the one that never ceases, from the moment the ship leaves the harbor until it returns to the shore, is the conversation between the hull and the water. It is a liquid language, a rhythmic shush that follows the curve of the prow as it parts the sea. Imagine the sound of a heavy silk curtain being drawn slowly across a stone floor. That is the sound of the ship moving through the swells. It is a soft, rushing noise, a gentle friction that speaks of displacement and momentum. Below the waterline, this sound changes, becoming a deeper, more resonant gurgle. Inside the hold, the hull acts like the body of a great wooden instrument, catching the vibrations of the ocean and magnifying them. You can hear the bubbles of air trapped in the wake, a tiny, percussive pop and fizz that sounds like 1,000 secret whispers. The water does not just hit the ship, it caresses it, sliding along the planks with a melodic, bubbling sigh that rises and falls with every roll of the vessel. As the night deepens, the swells often become more regular, and the sound of the water takes on a hypnotic, metronomic quality. There is the slap of a small wave hitting the midships, a crisp, clean sound, followed by the long, trailing wash of the water retreating. Then, there is the silence of the trough, a brief moment of weightlessness where the only sound is the internal creaking of the ship's skeleton, before the next wave arrives with its familiar, watery embrace. This rhythm is the heartbeat of the sea, a slow and steady pulse that vibrates through the very soles of your feet if you stand upon the deck. It is a sound that demands nothing of you. It simply exists, a constant reminder that you are being carried by a force much larger than yourself, a liquid cradle that knows no rest. Higher up, in the dark expanse of the rigging, the wind performs its own solo. The great mast, that sturdy trunk of pine that reaches toward the stars, is the conductor of this aerial music. When the wind is light, it moves through the ropes with a hollow, mournful whistle, a sound that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The ropes themselves, thick and heavy with the salt of 1,000 miles, have their own distinct voices. Under tension, they thrum a low-frequency vibration that you feel in your chest as much as you hear with your ears. It is the sound of energy being captured and held, a taut, musical hum that signifies the ship is underway. The sail, too, contributes to this symphony. The heavy linen, softened by the sun and the spray, reacts to every shift in the breeze. When the wind fills it perfectly, the sail is silent, a great, rounded wall of white in the darkness. But when the wind falters or shifts, the fabric speaks with a sharp, percussive crack as it snaps taut, followed by the soft, undulating flutter of the edges as they search for the air once more. This sound is like the beating of a giant's wings, a rhythmic pulsing that marks the ship's progress. To the sailor lying on the deck, this sound is a reassurance that the wind is still with them, a steady, invisible hand pushing them forward through the night. Perhaps the most intimate sounds are those that come from the ship itself, the internal dialogue of the wood. An ancient ship is not a rigid, lifeless object. It is a living, breathing entity that expands, contracts, and flexes with the sea and the temperature. As the cool air of the night settles over the deck, the timber begins to settle. You can hear the tick and pop of the planks as they contract, a tiny, sharp sound like the snapping of a twig. The great beams of the keel and the ribs of the hull groan with a deep, structural resonance, a sound that seems to rise from the very depths of the vessel. It is a slow, lingering creak, a long and weary sigh as the wood adjusts to the weight of the water and the pull of the mast. This groaning is not a sound of distress. It is a sound of flexibility and strength. The ancient shipwrights built their vessels to move with the sea, not to fight against it, and these sounds are the evidence of that wisdom. The ship is speaking of its integrity, its ability to bend without breaking. There is a rhythmic quality to these groans, a back-and-forth dialogue between the port and starboard sides as the ship rolls. You hear the wood sigh on the upward swell, and then moan as it settles into the trough. It is a comforting noise, like the settling of an old house at night, or the deep, rhythmic breathing of a large animal at rest. It is the sound of the ship telling its crew that it is holding, that it is strong, and that it is watching over them. Amidst these large environmental sounds, there are the smaller human noises that punctuate the night. These are the sounds of the watch, the men who remain awake while the rest of the crew sleeps. Their movements are practiced and quiet, designed to disturb the peace as little as possible. You might hear the soft, rhythmic padding of bare feet on the wooden deck, a muffled thud-thud that is barely a whisper. The skin of the sailor's feet, toughened by years of labor, makes a distinctive sound against the grain of the wood, a slight, dry scuff that speaks of careful, deliberate movement. The watchman might adjust a rope, the sound of the hemp sliding over a wooden cleat, a soft, rasping zizz. He might lean against the rail, the wood creaking slightly under his weight. Occasionally, there is the low, murmured exchange of words between the man at the helm and the lookout, voices kept at a low, melodic pitch that blends into the sound of the wind. These voices are not intrusive. They are part of the ship's ecosystem, a human thread woven into the fabric of the night. They are the sounds of vigilance, of care, and of the quiet responsibility that keeps the ship on its course. Beneath the sail, where the rest of the men are gathered, there is the collective sound of human rest. It is a soft chorus of steady, rhythmic breathing, communal hush that rises and falls in time with the motion of the sea. Occasionally, a man might shift in his sleep, his heavy wool cloak rustling against the deck with a sound like dry leaves in a gentle breeze. Someone might let out a long, slow sigh of deep exhaustion, a sound that is quickly swallowed by the larger sigh of the waves. This human rhythm is a powerful thing. It creates a sense of safety and belonging in the middle of the vast, indifferent ocean. These soft, vulnerable sounds are a testament to the strength of the community. They are the sounds of life continuing, of bodies being restored for the labor of the next day. As you lie there, drifting in the darkness of the ancient sea, let these sounds wash over you. Focus on the furthest sound, the distant, low rumble of the deep ocean, a sound so deep it is almost a vibration. Then, bring your attention closer to the rhythmic shush of the water against the hull. Listen to the way it changes pitch, rising as the ship climbs a wave and falling as it descends. Hear the tiny, musical gurgles of the wake as it trails behind, a liquid memory of the ship's passage. Now, listen to the wood. Hear the deep, resonant groan of the mast, a sound that carries the history of the forest within it. Listen to the tick and settle of the deck planks beneath you, the wood responding to the cooling air. Hear the rhythmic creak of the joints, a slow swaying music that matches the movement of your own body. This is the voice of the ship, a steady, honest sound that has comforted sailors for thousands of years. It is a sound of permanence and reliability, a wooden heartbeat that never falters. Listen to the wind in the rigging, the soft, hollow whistle as it passes through the ropes, the gentle thrum of the lines under tension. Hear the occasional rhythmic flap of the sail, a sound like a distant drumbeat marking the tempo of the voyage. These are the sounds of the invisible world, the forces of nature being harnessed and directed by the skill of the crew. They are the sounds of the ship's soul, the breath that gives it life and movement. The silence of the night is not an absence of sound, but a presence of peace. It is a dense, velvety silence that allows these small, delicate noises to be heard. It is the silence of the stars, the silence of the horizon, and the silence of the deep. In this space, every creak, every splash, and every breath becomes a meditation. There is no need for thought, no need for action. There is only the listening. You are a passenger in a world of sound, carried by a vessel that knows its way, and a sea that has no end as the night progresses. The sounds seem to merge into a single, continuous drone, a white noise of wood and water that acts as a profound sedative. The distinctions between the wind, the waves, and the timber begin to blur, creating a shimmering, sonic environment that surrounds and protects you. It is as if the ship and the sea have joined their voices to sing a lullaby to the sleeping crew. The rhythm is so steady, so predictable, and so ancient that it bypasses the conscious mind and speaks directly to the spirit. The transition into the deep night at sea is a slow, velvet descent, a gradual blurring of the boundaries between the dark wood of the ship and the even darker ink of the ocean. Once the final traces of the sun's orange and purple fire have been extinguished beneath the horizon, the world transforms into a singular, vast chamber of shadow. There is no artificial light to pierce this darkness, no distant glow from a city to soften the edge of the sky. There is only the ship, a tiny, floating island of human life, and the infinite expanse of the stars above. The air grows noticeably cooler now, a damp and heavy chill that carries the weight of the water, settling upon the deck and the rigging like a silent, invisible frost. For the sailors, this is the time when the physical world contracts, drawing them closer together into the heart of the vessel. The work of the day is folded away, like the sails of a smaller craft, and a profound, heavy stillness begins to permeate the air. A stillness that is not an absence of life, but a deep, collective exhale. As the darkness settles, the sailors begin the quiet, practiced ritual of finding their places to rest. In the ancient world, there was no separation between the space for work and the space for sleep. The deck was their bed, and the sky was their roof. They move with a slow feline grace, their feet knowing the path even when their eyes can no longer see the grain of the wood. One by one, they choose their spots, often returning to the same few square feet of planking they have claimed since the voyage began. Some prefer the shelter of the high bulwarks, where the wooden walls provide a barrier against the spray. Others tuck themselves near the base of the mast, seeking the structural solidity of the ship's spine. A few might find a place among the spare coils of rope, the hemp providing a rough, aromatic cushion that smells of the earth. There is a sense of deep, wordless communication in this settling a nod in the dark, a soft shift of a limb to make room for a companion. They are like a pack of wolves or a flock of birds, instinctively huddling together for warmth and security against the vast, cold emptiness of the night. The most vital companion for the sleeping sailor is his heavy cloak, a garment of thick, undyed wool that serves as his shield against the elements. As they prepare for sleep, they unfurl these cloaks with a slow, rhythmic deliberateness. The fabric is heavy and coarse, carrying the scent of the sheep it came from, the sharp tang of wood smoke from distant hearths, and the pervasive, salty musk of the sea. They wrap themselves tightly, tucking the edges beneath their bodies to create a small, warm cocoon. The wool is a living thing, absorbing the dampness of the night air while keeping the heat of the body trapped within. To a man lying on a hard wooden deck, the weight of this cloak is a profound comfort, a physical reassurance of protection. They lie down together, often in long rows or small clusters, their bodies nearly touching. In this proximity, there is a shared warmth that defies the chill of the ocean. You can hear the rhythmic rustle of the wool as they settle, a sound like dry grass swaying in the wind, followed by the deep, heavy sighs of men finally letting go of the day's burdens. As they lie there, looking upward, the sky reveals itself in a way that is impossible to witness from the land, without the interference of dust or light. The stars appear not as distant pinpricks, but as brilliant, pulsing orbs of silver and gold, so thick and numerous that they seem to form a solid canopy over the ship. The Milky Way stretches across the zenith like a river of luminous dust, a celestial path that mirrors the watery path of the ship below. To the ancient sailor, these stars were not just beautiful, they were the guardians of the journey, the silent mapmakers of the deep. They would watch the slow rotation of the Great Bear or the steady, unwavering light of the North Star, feeling a sense of cosmic order that balanced the unpredictable nature of the sea. The stars provide a faint, ethereal light, just enough to catch the curve of the sail or the white foam of a wave, casting the world in a dreamlike, monochromatic glow. In this light, the ship feels like a sacred space, a vessel traveling not just through water, but through the very fabric of time and space. The sleep that comes at sea is a deep, rhythmic experience, governed by the constant motion of the waves. It is not the static, unmoving sleep of the land, but a fluid state of rest where the body remains in a subtle, continuous dialogue with the vessel. As the ship rolls gently from side to side, the sailors' bodies sway in unison, a collective movement that is as natural as breathing. This rocking is like the swaying of a cradle, a primal motion that lulls the mind into a state of profound relaxation. The hardness of the deck, which might seem unforgiving to a landsman, becomes a source of stability. The wood carries the vibrations of the sea directly into the bones, a low-frequency hum that acts as a sedative. They sleep with their ears open to the voice of the ship, the creak of the mast, the slap of the water, the whistle of the wind. These sounds are not disturbances. They are the lullaby of their world, the evidence that the ship is healthy and the journey is continuing. If the rhythm were to change, they would wake instantly. But as long as the song remains the same, they drift deeper and deeper into the quiet dark. The intimacy of this shared sleep is a foundational part of the mariner's life. In the darkness, the distinctions of rank or status fade away. They are simply a group of men, vulnerable and small, cradled in the ribs of a wooden beast. You can hear the collective sound of their breathing, soft, undulating chorus that rises and falls with the swells of the ocean. It is a communal heartbeat, a reminder that no one is alone in this vastness. Occasionally, a sailor might murmur in his sleep, a fragment of a dream about a green hill or a warm kitchen, and the sound is quickly absorbed by the rhythmic shush of the water against the hull. There is a profound trust in this silence, a trust in the ship, in the sea, and in the men on watch who remain awake to guard the rest of the others. The watchmen move like shadows, their footsteps a muffled padding on the damp planks, their eyes scanning the horizon where the black of the water meets the black of the sky. Their presence is a quiet promise, a sentinel of safety that allows the crew to surrender completely to the night. The dampness of the night is a constant presence, a fine mist that coats the wool of the blankets and the hair of the sleeping men. It turns the deck into a dark, shimmering mirror and makes the ropes feel heavy and limp. But beneath the cloaks, there is a microclimate of warmth and dryness. The men tuck their heads into the folds of the fabric, breathing in the scent of the wool and the salt, their breath creating small puffs of white in the cool air. This contrasts the cold, vast exterior and the warm, narrow interiors, the essence of comfort at sea. It is the feeling of being held, of being sheltered within a shell that has been crafted by human hands to withstand the infinite. The ship is a miracle of engineering and courage, and as it glides through the night, it carries the dreams and the weary bodies of its crew with a steady, unyielding grace. As the hours of the deep night pass, the world seems to shrink until only the ship exists. The horizon is gone, the land is a memory, and the future is a distant light. There is only the present moment, the sensation of the wood beneath the back, the weight of the cloak, and the rhythmic pulse of the waves. It is a state of being that is rare in the modern world, total immersion in the environment, a surrender to the natural rhythms of the earth. The mind slows down, its thoughts becoming as fluid and unhurried as the water. The worries of the day, the frayed rope, the low water jar, the distance to the next port dissolve into the darkness. In this space, the sailor is not a laborer or a traveler. He is simply a part of the sea, a passenger on a journey that has no beginning and no end. The stars continue their slow, silent march across the sky, marking the passage of the night with a celestial precision. Orion climbs high, his belt of 3 bright stars gleaming like jewels, while the Pleiades cluster together like a handful of silver grain. The sailors who are awake look up at these lights with a sense of ancient recognition. They know the stories of the stars, the myths of heroes and gods who were placed in the heavens to guide the way. These stories provide a framework of meaning for the journey, a reminder that they are part of a long lineage of men who have looked at these same stars from the decks of similar ships. The night is not a void. It is a library of light, a repository of wisdom and history that is open to anyone with the patience to look. The bioluminescence of the sea often adds a ghostly, magical element to the night. As the ship parts the water, the wake begins to glow with a soft, ethereal green light, as if the stars have fallen into the ocean and are being stirred by the hull. This fire of the sea creates a shimmering trail that stretches out behind the vessel, a path of cold flame that illuminates the churning water. The sailors watch this phenomenon with a quiet awe, knowing it to be a sign of the sea's hidden life. It is a reminder that even in the darkest night, the ocean is teeming with mysteries, with tiny creatures that carry their own light into the depths. The glow reflects off the damp wood of the stern and the faces of the watchmen, casting the ship in an otherworldly radiance that defies the surrounding blackness. In the deepest reaches of the night, when the stars are the only witnesses to the ship's progress, the mind of the ancient sailor often drifts away from the physical world of wood and rope and into the vast, silent landscapes of the interior. This is the hour when the boundary between the seen and the unseen becomes thin, and the quiet thoughts that are easily pushed aside by the labor of the day begin to rise like the mist from the water. There is a profound, reflective quality to these moments, a sense of being suspended between two infinities, the infinite height of the heavens and the infinite depth of the sea. For the men on watch, or those lying awake, listening to the rhythmic breathing of their companions, the ship becomes a vessel not just for their bodies, but for their fears, their beliefs, and their deepest longings for the land they have left behind. The fear of the deep in the ancient world was not the frantic, sharp-edged terror of modern cinema, but a slow, heavy awareness of the unknown. It was a respect for the scale of the ocean, a realization that beneath the thin, resin-coated planks of the hull lay a world that was utterly indifferent to human life. To an ancient mariner, the sea was a kingdom of immense weight and silence, a place where the sun's light could not reach and where the laws of the earth did not apply. They thought of the miles of water beneath them not as a void, but as a crowded, ancient space inhabited by forces and entities that were as old as the world itself. This fear was a quiet companion, a shadow that sat beside them on the deck. It manifested in the way they listened to the groaning of the timber knot, just as a structural sound, but as the ship's own voice protesting against the pressure of the abyss. They understood that their survival was a fragile thing, a temporary agreement between their skill, their vessel, and the whims of the gods who ruled the waves. Superstition, in this context, was not a matter of idle fancy, but a practical language of survival, a way of negotiating with the immense powers of nature. Every ancient ship was a temple in its own right, a space sanctified by small rituals and quiet observances. A sailor might carry a small smooth stone from his home village, tucked into a fold of his tunic, a piece of the earth to keep him grounded in a world of water. He might touch the wooden prow of the ship with a certain rhythm, or avoid speaking of certain things when the wind was particularly low. These were not seen as weaknesses, but as marks of a wise and attentive mind. They watched the flight of a lone bird with a bated breath, searching for meaning in the curve of its wing or the direction of its path. They whispered to the wind as if it were a temperamental guest, offering quiet words of praise or humble requests for safe passage. There was a belief that the sea heard everything, that the vibrations of human thought and speech rippled through the water just as surely as the wake of the ship, and so they moved through the night with a quiet, reverent caution. In these hours of stillness, the memory of home becomes a vivid, sensory sanctuary. To the sailor, home is not just a destination, but a collection of textures, smells, and sounds that exist in perfect opposition to the life at sea. They think of the smell of dry earth after a summer rain, a scent so rich and grounded that it seems like a dream in the middle of the salt spray. They remember the feeling of walking on a path that does not move, the solid, unyielding embrace of the soil beneath their feet. They recall the specific, sweet aroma of jasmine or mountain thyme drifting through an open window, and the sound of a goat's bell clinking in the distance, a sound that signifies the presence of hills and valleys and the permanence of the shore. These thoughts are not painful, but restorative. They are the anchors that keep the soul from drifting too far into the blue. They carry with them the faces of those they have left behind, wives, children seeing them in the flickering light of the stars or the patterns of the foam. They imagine the daily routines of their villages, the gathering at the well, the lighting of the evening lamps, the shared meals around a stationary table. There is a profound sense of nostos, the ancient longing for the return, which colors every quiet thought. They are travelers by necessity or by trade, but they are inhabitants of the land by spirit. The ship is their temporary home, a wooden shell that protects their dreams of the shore. They find comfort in the thought that the same stars they are watching are also shining over their own hearths, a celestial bridge that connects the wanderer to his home. This realization brings a gentle peace, a feeling of being part of a larger, interconnected world where even the furthest sailor is never truly lost as long as his memory of the land remains bright. The beliefs of the ancient sailor were woven into the very fabric of the ship's construction. They believed that the wood itself retained a memory of the forest, a spirit that protected those who cared for it. This is why they treated the masts and the planks with such reverence, cleaning them and sealing them as if they were tending to the skin of a living being. They thought of the ship as a partner in their survival, a guardian that stood between them and the crushing weight of the deep. In the dark, they might feel the vibration of the hull and imagine it as the ship's own heartbeat, a steady, pulsing reassurance that the vessel was awake and vigilant. This animistic view of the world made the sea a less lonely place. It transformed the environment from a hostile void into a crowded, meaningful landscape where every wave and every gust of wind had a name and a story. There were whispers among the crew, passed during the change of the watch, about the spirits of the foam or the voices that could be heard in the rigging when the moon was thin. These were not tales of horror, but of mystery, a recognition that the world was larger and more complex than the human mind could fully grasp. They spoke of ships that had sailed into the mist and found islands that appeared on no map, places where time flowed differently and the water was as clear as glass. These stories were a way of processing the vastness of the world, a way of giving shape to the infinite possibilities of the horizon. They were the poetry of the mariner, a collection of half-remembered truths and hopeful fictions that made the long nights more bearable as they sit in the darkness. The sailors also contemplate the nature of their own labor. They think of the thousands of men who have performed these same tasks before them, and the thousands who will follow. There is a quiet pride in this continuity, a sense of being a small but essential link in a chain of human effort that stretches back to the beginning of time. They find a meditative peace in the repetition of their thoughts, just as they find it in the repetition of their work. The worries of the future, the markets they will visit, the storms they might encounter, the wealth they hope to gain are present, but they are softened by the overwhelming reality of the present moment. In the middle of the sea, the future is as distant as the horizon, and the past is as deep as the wake. There is only the ship, the stars, and the quiet movement of the mind. The physical sensations of the night provide a grounding for these reflections. The coolness of the air on the skin, the smell of the damp wool, the rhythmic shush of the water, all of these things act as a sensory backdrop for the inner journey. They watch the bioluminescence of the wake, that ghostly, flickering light that seems to rise from the depths, and they see it as the sea's own dreaming. They feel the vibration of the rigging in their hands and see it as the wind's own song. This integration of the inner and outer worlds is the hallmark of the ancient maritime experience. There was no separation between the spiritual and the practical. To sail well was to be in harmony with the gods, and to be in harmony with the gods was to pay attention to the smallest details of the ship and the sea. In the quietest part of the night, the hour of the wolf before the first light of dawn, the thoughts of the sailor become most tender. This is the time when the longing for a home is most acute, but also when the peace of the sea is most profound. They feel a sense of absolute solitude, yet also an absolute connection to the universe. They are the only ones awake in a world that is sleeping, the silent watchers of the deep. They think of the fragility of life and the beauty of the moment, the way the starlight glints on a single drop of spray, or the way a companion's breathing matches the rhythm of the waves. It is a time of profound humility, a realization of one's own smallness in the face of the eternal. This inner world of the ancient sailor is a landscape of soft shadows and glowing lights. It is a place of deep respect for the mystery of the world and a fierce, quiet love for the simple realities of the land. It is a mind that is attuned to the subtle shifts of the environment, a heart that carries the weight of the sea and the warmth of the hearth in equal measure. As the night begins to thin and the first cold gray of the morning touches the eastern sky, these quiet thoughts do not disappear. They simply settle back into the depths of the mind, becoming the foundation for the day's labor. The sailor rises, stretches his tired limbs, and returns to the world of wood and rope, but he carries the silence of the night within him, a secret well of peace that he can draw from when the sun is high and the work is hard. As the days stretch out across the vast, undulating canvas of the Mediterranean, a subtle and profound transformation begins to take hold of the ship and everyone within its wooden embrace. The linear progression of time, so rigid and demanding upon the shore, starts to dissolve, replaced by a circular, rhythmic existence that knows no yesterday and no tomorrow. Out here, where the land has long since dipped beneath the curve of the earth, there are no milestones to mark the passage of hours, no village bells to signal the time for prayer or market, and no changing shadows of trees to measure the afternoon. There is only the sun, the stars, and the infinite, shimmering blue. One day spills into the next with the seamlessness of water pouring into water, until the memory of when the journey began starts to fade, and the concept of a destination becomes a distant, ethereal dream. This is the true heart of the ancient maritime experience, the feeling of being suspended in a timeless void, a tiny wooden world drifting between the mirror of the sky and the mirror of the deep. The morning light arrives not as a new beginning, but as a familiar return, a soft reawakening of the colors that the night had hidden. When the sailor opens his eyes, he sees the same grain in the wood of the mast, the same weathered pattern of the ropes, and the same pale salt-crusted linen of the sail. The first task of the day is exactly the same as the last task of the previous day, and the one before that. He reaches for the same leather bucket, hears the same splash as it hits the water, and feels the same rhythmic pull in his shoulders as he hauls it back up. There is a deep, meditative comfort in this repetition. The mind, no longer burdened by the need to navigate the complexities of social life or the anxieties of the future, settles into a state of quiet observation. The act of scrubbing the deck becomes a prayer of movement. The act of checking the rigging becomes a ritual of touch. The sailor does not think about the miles traveled. He thinks only of the texture of the rope beneath his palm and the way the water swirls across the planks, reflecting the growing brightness of the sky. By the time the sun has reached its midpoint, the world has become a singular, dazzling bowl of light. The horizon, that perfect and unbroken circle, seems to draw closer and then recede, a shimmering boundary that offers no hints of what lies beyond. In this midday heat, the ship feels as though it is standing still, even as the wind pulls at the sail and the water hisses along the hull. There is a strange, beautiful paradox in this movement. The sensation of traveling at a steady pace while remaining perfectly centered in an unchanging landscape. The clouds drift by in slow, majestic processions, their shadows gliding across the face of the deep like ghosts of islands. The sailors watch them with a detached, peaceful interest, seeing shapes of lions, mountains, or familiar faces in the vapor, only to watch them dissolve into the blue. To be at sea for many days is to become a student of the sky. To know the subtle shifts in the hue of the atmosphere and the way the light catches the spray in 1,000 tiny, momentary rainbows dot the repetition of the meals, further anchors this sense of timelessness. The breaking of the hard bread, the measured pour of the water, the shared bowl of olives, these are the constants that provide a skeletal structure to the drifting days. There is no variety to spark the appetite, yet the food is eaten with a profound, quiet gratitude. The taste of the salt, the dryness of the grain, and the coolness of the water become the primary sensations of existence. The crew eats in a shared silence that is not empty, but full of the collective recognition of their situation. They have said everything there is to say. They know each other's stories, their hopes, and their fears. Now, they simply exist together, a group of souls bound by the same wooden walls, moving through the same endless blue. Their movements are synchronized, their breaths are aligned, and their eyes are all turned toward the same shimmering horizon. The work of the ship continues, but it is performed with a languid, unhurried grace. A tear in the sail is mended with the same slow, rhythmic stitches that have been used for centuries. A frayed rope is replaced with a new one, the fibers smelling of the sun and the earth. These tasks are not seen as chores to be finished, but as part of the natural ecology of the ship. The vessel is a living thing, and, like any living thing, it requires constant, gentle care. The sailors move about the deck with a swaying gait that has become second nature, their bodies instinctively anticipating every roll and pitch of the hull. They are no longer men on a ship. They have become part of the ship itself, as much a part of its structure as the mast or the keel. The distinction between the human and the wooden begins to blur in the salt air, as the skin darkens to the color of the oak, and the mind becomes as vast and rhythmic as the sea. In the late afternoon, when the sun begins to lose its white intensity and turns toward a deep, liquid gold, the feeling of drifting becomes most acute. The water changes color, shifting from a bright, translucent turquoise to a royal indigo, and then to a bruised, heavy purple. The waves seem to slow down, their crests catching the light like the edges of a cooling flame. This is the hour of the long shadows, when the ship's rigging is traced in dark, elegant lines across the deck. The sailors sit against the bulwarks, their work done for the day, and let their gaze wander over the water. There is a sense of immense scale in these moments, a realization of the tiny space they occupy in the world. Yet, instead of feeling diminished by this vastness, they feel a strange sense of belonging. They are the only witnesses to this particular sunset, the only ones to see the way the light hits this particular patch of ocean. They are the guardians of this moment of beauty, and that realization brings a quiet, enduring peace. The days blur because there is no conflict to define them. The wind is a steady, invisible companion. The sea is a rhythmic, undulating floor, and the ship is a reliable, wooden cradle. Without the peaks and valleys of drama, the experience of time flattens out into a long, smooth plateau. A week might pass in what feels like a single, extended afternoon. The sailor might find himself staring at the wake of the ship for an hour, lost in the mesmerizing patterns of the foam, only to find that the sun has barely moved. This is the sea trance, a state of consciousness where the mind is both perfectly empty and perfectly full. It is a form of meditation that can only be achieved through the long-term isolation of the open water. The distractions of the world have been stripped away, leaving only the fundamental elements of life: breath, movement, light, and water. As the night returns, it does not bring an end to the day, but a continuation of the same timeless rhythm in a different key. The stars emerge in the same patterns, the moon traces the same arc, and the ship continues its steady, sighing progress. The changing of the watch is a quiet, wordless transition, a passing of the torch in the darkness. The men who go to sleep do so with the knowledge that when they wake, the world will look exactly the same. There is a profound security in this lack of change. In a world that is often chaotic and unpredictable, the endless sea offers a rare and beautiful consistency. The sailor knows that the sun will rise, the water will be blue, and the ship will hold. This certainty allows the soul to rest in a way that is impossible on land. The ship itself seems to absorb the passage of time, its wood becoming more seasoned, its ropes more supple, and its soul more resonant. Every day spent at sea adds another layer of salt to the grain, another memory of the wind to the mast. The vessel is not just a tool for transport. It is a repository of the journey, a witness to the blurring of the days. The creaking of the planks takes on a more melodic quality, a song of endurance that has no final note. The sailors listen to this song as they drift between wakefulness and sleep, feeling the pulse of the ship as if it were their own. They are travelers who have forgotten the concept of travel, wanderers who have found their home in the movement. If you were to ask a sailor on the 10th day of a calm voyage what day it was, he might not be able to tell you. He might point to the sun and say it is noon, or point to the stars and say it is the middle watch. But the names of the days have no meaning here. He measures his life now by the thickness of the salt on his skin, the length of his beard, and the amount of water remaining in the jars. These are the honest markers of time, the physical evidence of his existence. He is a man of the present, living in a world that is eternally now. The sea has washed away the past and hidden the future, leaving him only with the immediate reality of the wind and the wave. Let yourself sink into this feeling of suspension. Imagine the horizon as a perfect circle that never breaks, a boundary that keeps the world at bay. Feel the slow, swaying motion of the ship, a rhythm that has no beginning and no end. There is no rush to reach the shore, no urgency to find the land. The land is a different world, a place of noise and crowds and fragmented time. Here, there is only the unity of the sea and the sky. You are drifting in a sea of blue, carried by a wind that knows no master, within a vessel that has seen 1,000 such days. The sun rises and sets, the stars appear and fade, and you remain centered in the heart of the peace. There are moments on the ancient sea when the world seems to hold its breath, when the restless energy of the waves subsides into a state of absolute, glassy grace. This is the time of the great calm, a period where the Mediterranean transforms from a powerful, moving force into a mirror of polished obsidian or liquid silver. In these hours, the ship does not battle the elements. It exists in a state of quiet acceptance, gliding through a world that has become soft, silent, and infinitely still. There is no urgency to reach a harbor, no fear of the horizon, and no struggle against the current. The sailors move with a practiced, effortless ease, their bodies so perfectly attuned to the ship that they seem to flow across the deck like the very shadows cast by the mast. It is a time of profound peace, a moment where the boundary between the human spirit and the vastness of the water simply ceases to exist. The surface of the sea is so still that it seems impossible to tell where the water ends and the sky begins. The horizon is no longer a sharp line, but a soft, hazy transition between two different shades of blue. In the heat of the afternoon, the water takes on a heavy, oily consistency. The small ripples created by the ship's prow, unfolding slowly and languidly, like silk being smoothed by an invisible hand. You can look down over the rail and see far into the depths, the sunlight piercing the blue in long, shimmering shafts of gold that dance and fade as they descend into the silence. There is no white foam, no spray, and no roar of the surf. There is only the rhythmic, musical clop of a single wave hitting the hull, a sound as delicate as a heartbeat. The stillness is not empty. It is a dense, vibrating presence that fills the lungs and settles the mind, a reminder that the sea, for all its power, can also be a place of perfect sanctuary. The wind has softened into a gentle, rhythmic breath, a sigh of the atmosphere that barely ruffles the surface of the linen sails. The sails are not taut and straining now. They are softly rounded, holding the air with the gentle pressure of a hand against a cheek. They do not snap or flutter. They simply exist as a great pale curve against the sky, a silent witness to the invisible currents of the world. The rigging, which can scream and thrum in a storm, is now a collection of quiet, sleeping lines. The ropes hang in graceful catenaries, their fibers relaxed and warmed by the sun. Occasionally, a single line might tap against the mast, a soft, wooden thud that marks the slow swaying rhythm of the vessel. It is a sound of absolute safety, a confirmation that the tension of the journey has been released, and the ship is at rest even as it moves. On the deck, the sailors move without the need for speech or command. Their bodies are maps of the vessel, their feet finding every cleat, every peg, and every seam in the wood without the need for sight. They move with a slow, feline grace, a product of years spent balancing on a moving floor. When a man reaches for a rope, he does so with a fluid motion that is both powerful and delicate. He does not pull, he leans. He does not grab, he guides. There is an economy of movement here that is beautiful to behold, a realization that in the calm, there is no need for force. They are like dancers in a slow-motion performance, their actions dictated by the subtle, swaying pulse of the sea. They communicate through nods, through the shared direction of a gaze, or through the simple, comforting presence of their bodies. The silence is their language, a shared understanding that in this moment, everything is as it should be. The ship itself seems to have found its true voice in the calm. Without the roar of the wind or the crash of the waves, the subtle sounds of the timber become a meditative symphony. You can hear the deep, resonant hum of the hula sound that feels like it is coming from the center of the earth. It is a low-frequency vibration that speaks of the oak's strength and the pine's flexibility. The mast, though under little pressure, still gives off an occasional, musical creak along. Lingering shush of wood against wood that sounds like a deep, contented sigh. These are the sounds of a vessel that is healthy and whole, a ship that has found its equilibrium in the vastness of the deep. The scent of the ship is also more pronounced in the stillness, the warm, sweet aroma of the sun-baked resin, the earthy musk of the ropes, and the clean mineral temps of the salt. It is the scent of a home that is both ancient and ever-new, in this state of quiet acceptance. The passage of time becomes even more ethereal. The hours do not march forward, they drift. A sailor might spend an hour sitting by the prow, his eyes fixed on the point where the cutwater meets the glassy surface. He watches the way the water peels away in two perfect, translucent curls, a liquid architecture that is created and destroyed in every second. He is not thinking of the port, or the cargo, or the family he left behind. He is simply present in the unfolding of the water. This is the true rest of the sailor, not the sleep of the night, but the wakeful peace of the calm. The mind becomes as clear and reflective as the sea itself. The ripples of anxiety and thought, smoothing out until only the reflection of the sky remains. The light of the afternoon begins to change, turning from a brilliant, penetrating white to a soft, honeyed amber. The sun, as it nears the horizon, casts long, shimmering paths across the water, turning the mirror of the sea into a field of liquid gold. The shadows on the deck stretch out, long and thin, tracing the geometry of the rigging in dark lines across the planks. The sailors move into these shadows, their skin glowing in the low light, their movements becoming even slower and more deliberate. There is a sense of sacredness in this transition, a feeling that the world is being bathed in a final, golden blessing before the arrival of the stars. The air is cool and sweet, carrying the first hints of the evening dampness, a refreshing touch against the warmth of the wood. The companionship of the crew in the calm is a quiet, powerful thing. They sit together in small groups, or perhaps leaning against the rail, their shoulders touching, their eyes all turned toward the horizon. They share a cup of diluted wine, the liquid a deep garnet red in the golden light. They do not talk of the journey. They talk of the small things, the taste of the olives, the color of the water, the way the clouds are forming in the west. These are the conversations of men who have seen the world in its most raw and powerful forms and have learned to cherish the moments of stillness. They are bound together by the wood and the wave, a brotherhood of silence that is deeper than any made on land. In the calm, they are not just co-workers. They are a single, collective soul, drifting together through the beauty of the world. As the sun finally touches the horizon, it seems to melt into the water, its light spreading out in a wide, golden fan that fills the sky. The sea catches this light and holds it, the surface turning into a sea of fire for a few brief, glorious minutes. The ship is a dark silhouette against this brilliance, a tiny, perfect shape in a world of light. The sailors stand in silence, their faces illuminated by the glow, their hearts full of the quiet acceptance of the moment. They know that the night is coming, and with it the stars and the watch, but they do not fear it. They have found their peace in the calm, and that peace will sustain them through the darkness. The sea has given them a gift, a moment of absolute clarity and rest, and they accept it with a humble, quiet gratitude. The water is now a deep, velvety violet, the reflections of the first stars beginning to appear on its surface like tiny, sunken jewels. The ship moves on, a shadow in the twilight, its wake a silver thread that connects the day to the night. The sounds of the vessel are even more delicate now, the soft clink of a ceramic jar, the rustle of a wool cloak, the rhythmic, melodic breathing of the crew. Everything is in its place. The ropes are secure, the wood is strong, and the course is true. The sailors begin to settle for the night, their movements as quiet as the falling dew. They have lived through another day of the ancient sea, a day of light and wood and water, and they are ready for the rest that follows. Close your eyes and let the calm of the sea wash over you. Imagine you are lying on the deck of that ancient ship, the warm wood beneath you, the cool air of the evening on your face. Feel the slow, swaying motion of the vessel, a rhythm that is as steady and reliable as the tides. Listen to the silence of the sea, a silence that is full of the whispers of the deep. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. You are safe, you are held, and you are at peace. The world is vast, and the journey is long, but in this moment, you are exactly where you belong. You are part of the ship, part of the sea, and part of the timeless. Quiet acceptance of the world. The night is fully here now. The sky a dense canopy of stars that reflect in the mirror of the water. The ship is a cradle in the darkness, moving through the silence with a steady, unhurried grace. The sailors are asleep, their dreams filled with the scent of the resin and the sound of the wind. The watchman sits at the stern, his hand on the steering oar, his eyes on the stars. He is at peace, his heart full of the quiet wisdom of the sea. The journey continues, but the calm remains, a foundational layer of peace that will never truly leave. Let the rhythm of the waves carry you deeper into rest, into the soft, velvet dark of the ancient night. You are home. You are safe. You are at peace. As our long journey through the quiet hours of the ancient sea begins to draw to its natural close, the ship itself seems to acknowledge the transition, moving with a grace that is both heavy and weightless. We find ourselves standing one last time at the stern, watching the silver thread of the wake as it stretches back toward the horizon, a delicate, ephemeral path that the ocean is already beginning to pull back into itself. The sea does not keep footprints. It does not hold the memory of our passage in any way that the eye can see. The water simply closes over the path we have taken, returning to its state of perfect, undulating equilibrium. This is the great cycle of the deep, the constant movement, and the constant return to stillness. The ship, this sturdy vessel of oak and pine that has been our world for these many hours, is now gliding into the soft, gray mists of history, moving away from the sharp clarity of our observation and back into the long, quiet sleep of the past. The sailors we have watched so closely are now fully surrendered to their rest. In the dim, starlit glow of the deck, they look like part of the ship's own structure, their forms softened by the heavy wool of their cloaks and the deep shadows of the bulwarks. Their breathing has become a single, collective rhythm, a soft and steady sigh that matches the slow, swaying pulse of the Mediterranean. We see the rise and fall of a shoulder, the quiet stillness of a weathered hand resting against a coil of rope, and the peaceful set of a face that has spent its life looking into the sun and the spray. These men, whose names have been lost to the centuries, carry with them the true history of the sea, not the dates of battles or the names of kings, but the memory of the way the light hits the water at dawn, the taste of salt on the lips, and the profound, shared silence of a crew at peace. They are moving away from us now, drifting back into the depths of time, their stories preserved not in books, but in the very grain of the wood and the salt of the air. The ship continues its progress, a dark and elegant silhouette against the shimmering field of the stars. It moves without urgency, for in the world of the ancient sea, the journey is as significant as the shore. The mast, that great and silent conductor of the wind, reaches up toward the heavens, its top tracing slow, invisible circles against the constellation of the Great Bear. The sails are full and silent, holding the breath of the world in a steady, white embrace. Everything about the vessel speaks of completion and integrity. The ropes are secure, the hull is tight, and the course is true. The ship has performed its duty, carrying its cargo of lives and dreams across the vastness of the deep. And now it is ready to fade into the velvet darkness of the night. It is a beautiful, lingering departure, a slow dissolution of detail until only the essence of the vessel remains, a symbol of human ingenuity and endurance. Floating in the infinite dot as we pull back, the sounds of the ship begin to grow more distant, becoming a soft, atmospheric hum that is indistinguishable from the sound of the sea itself. The rhythmic creak of the timber, the melodic shush of the water, and the hollow whistle of the wind in the rigging all merge into a single, sedative drone. It is a white noise of history, a sound that has existed for thousands of years and will continue for thousands more. The sea remains, eternal and unchanging, its surface a series of long, gentle swells that cradled the memories of a million voyages. The water we have traveled is the same water that carried the triremes of Athens and the merchantmen of Phoenicia, a liquid bridge that connects all of human history into a single, flowing moment. The ocean does not age, it only exists, a vast and silent witness to the passage of the wooden ships and the men who loved them. The lives aboard the ship, the shared meals, the repetitive labor, the quiet fears, and the long, drifting thoughts are now becoming part of the great, quiet reservoir of the past. They are like the bioluminescence we saw in the wake, a flickering, magical light that glows brightly for a moment before vanishing back into the dark. But even though they fade from our sight, they are not gone. They are woven into the fabric of the world, a foundational layer of the human experience that remains beneath the surface of our modern lives. The peace we have found on this ancient deck is a peace that belongs to everyone, a quiet stillness that can be rediscovered whenever we turn our eyes toward the horizon or listen to the sound of the wind. The sailors have taught us how to live in the present, how to find dignity in the ordinary, and how to surrender to the rhythms of a world that is much larger than ourselves. The air around the ship is cool and heavy with the scent of the deep night. It is a fragrance of salt, old wood, and the immense, clean emptiness of the open water. This scent is the last thing to fade, a lingering sensory connection to the world of the mariner. As we drift further away, the ship becomes a small, glowing ember in the vastness of the dark, a tiny spark of human warmth in the middle of the cold, starlit sea. We watch it until it is nothing more than a single point of light, indistinguishable from the stars that reflect on the water's surface. The transition is complete. The ship has returned to the history from which we borrowed it, and we are left with the silence and the stars. The feeling of the wooden deck beneath our feet is now being replaced by the softness of our own. So, the transition from the ancient world to the present occurring with the same gentleness as the changing of the watch. The swaying motion of the vessel lingers in the body, a ghostly rhythm that continues to soothe the mind and settle the spirit. We carry the quietness of the sea within us now, a secret well of peace that we can draw from in the hours of our own rest. The journey has reached its destination, not a physical shore, but a state of profound, restorative stillness. The world is quiet, the night is deep, and the sea is at rest. In this final moment of reflection, we can see the beauty of the entire voyage, the golden light of the dawn, the heavy heat of the midday sun, the rhythmic labor of the afternoon, and the velvet sanctuary of the night. We have seen the ship as a living thing, a partner in the survival of the men who manned it. We have felt the strength of the oak and the flexibility of the pine. We have tasted the salt and heard the whispers of the deep. It has been a journey of the senses and the soul, a reminder of the timeless connection between humanity and the natural world. There is nothing left to be done, no more tasks to perform, and no more horizons to search. Everything is finished, and everything is whole. The sea remains, a calm and eternal presence that knows no beginning and no end. It will continue to swell and retreat, to mirror the stars and to catch the sun, long after our names are forgotten. The ancient ship is still out there, in the quiet mists of the past, gliding effortlessly through the blue. The sailors are still sleeping, their cloaks wrapped tight, their dreams filled with the scent of the resin. They are safe, they are at peace, and they are home, and so are we. The darkness of the night is a warm and welcoming embrace, a space where the mind can finally let go, and the body can fully surrender to the gravity of sleep. Listen one last time to the distant, phantom sound of the water against the hull, a soft, rhythmic shush that is getting fainter and fainter. Hear the final, lingering creak of the mast, a wooden sigh that carries the weight of 1,000 years. These sounds are the lullaby of the ancient world, a song of endurance and peace that is now fading into the silence of your own rest. The stars are watching over you, just as they watched over the sailors on the Mediterranean 2 millennia ago. The world is vast, the sea is deep, and you are cradled in the heart of a perfect, unchanging stillness. As you drift into the deep, restorative waters of sleep, let the image of the ship be your final companion. See it moving away into the moonlight, its sails pale and ghost-like, its hull a dark shadow on the silver water. It is moving into a realm where time has no meaning, where the days and nights are one, and where the peace of the sea is eternal. You are traveling with it, moving into your own quiet history, your own sanctuary of rest. The journey is over. The ship is gone. There is only the sea, and the silence, and the stars. The weight of your body is the weight of the ship, in the water steady, grounded, and perfectly supported. The rhythm of your breath is the rhythm of the waves, slow, deep, and inevitable. You are sinking into the softness of the night, moving deeper and deeper into the quiet dark. There is no more need for words, no more need for thought. The whispers of the deep have told their story, and now they are inviting you to join them in their long, peaceful sleep. The ancient sea is a mother's arms, holding you safe, holding you close, and guiding you into the realm of dreams. The stars are fading now, the silver light turning to a soft, impenetrable black. The horizon has vanished, and the ship has become a part of the memory of the water. You are at peace. You are at rest. The journey is complete, and the sea is eternal. Let the silence take you. Let the darkness hold you. Let the rhythm of the ancient world carry you away into the deepest, most beautiful sleep you have ever known. The world is at rest. The ship is at rest, and you are at rest. Good night.